Okay. And why he eepy? And why he eepy? Okay. There I am. Yeah. What's up? How you doing? How you doing? My name is Lonely. Nice to meet you. Here's my number. You can reach me. What's up, guys? Love your shirt, dude. Thanks, Karina. Wonder where I got it from. Sophia Isabel, you are consistently like one of the nicest commenters on the channel. You are consistently saying so many very nice things. Sophia left a comment earlier. You'll always have our support. Keep working hard. Just such a nice thing to say, and just consistently shows up and says nice things. So shout out to Sophia. He's a water type. I'm calling it right now. Be water, my friend. Be water. Jenny Z says, no, not you again. This is a bad sign. I have no idea what that means. I can see me. It's all about me. Hey, you look good today. Thank you. Fit check. Nothing going on. Just Goosebumps t-shirt and basketball shorts. That's about it. Call me sometime. No, thank you. Just watched Feek's video on the Tamil genocide and feeling awful. Hope this helps me. I'm sorry that you feel awful. Knowledge can be a very empowering thing, but it can also be extremely wearing on the soul to learn about all these different forms of suffering in the world. So please try to find your way to sort of heal yourself, like mentally, to feel better, and emotionally, because it's important. It's really important, even if it feels like it's not. That's the lyric of the song you just sang. What lyric? Oh, you had like a message, then you retracted it. Best regards from Mexico. From Mexico, me gustan tus videos. Muchas gracias, Donatiu. Muchísimas gracias. A mellow hello from your Australian fan, Tyrone. Good eye, mate. Hello, Trinity. Hello, Gorb. So, today, I'm going to do a quick Q and Izzy to celebrate 75k subscribers. We are 3/4 of the way to 100k on the Elliot Says Hello channel, and that is an incredible thing. Over the past year, over the past year, basically, we've grown from about 2k subs to this, and this new video has been doing really well. If you haven't seen it yet, it's called Are We Infantilizing Ourselves? It premiered 6 hours ago, and it's doing very well, like I said. And I hope that you all enjoyed it if you've watched it. If not, then please get a chance. Like, when you get a chance, check it out. Let me know your thoughts. Analytics are looking good on that one, so shout out to that. The first video that like got the channel going was this video right here 8 months ago. Wife guys keep cheating on our wives, on their wives. Oh Jesus, on their wives, which premiered on October 1st. This is where my hair was at that point. Since then, it's been a wild ride. We used to put out a video a week. We've recently slowed down to a video every 2 weeks since this video. And we're just going to keep it rolling. The new video that will come out in early July has been recorded already, which is extremely exciting. It's going to be good, I think. What I'm going to talk about in this stream is essentially just addressing some questions. I put a quick Q&A post on the community post area. Let's just refresh it one more time to double check. Yep, it's 21 comments. So on the lower side today, I guess you guys just didn't really get the chance to see it. But I'll be answering those Q&As in that comment on that community post, as well as answering questions from the chat. So if you have questions for me, feel free to send them. If you send them via super chat, they're guaranteed to stay around at least a lot longer. So, and I'll guarantee that I'll make sure I get to them, but I should be able to get to everything in the chat anyway. So don't feel obliged. Don't feel obligated to do anything. But if sometimes people have questions about the channel and questions about what I do here, so I want to sort of address them. And the way that I'm gonna start is to talk about a kind of question that wasn't exactly asked in the community post, but has been kind of talked about, has been kind of asked to me a few times over some different conversations, like some things that kind of come up sometimes when I'm on live and people ask me questions about my thoughts on things, about like ideologically where I stand on things, as well as just generally like sometimes I'll talk to like some accomplices, like acquaintances, friends, and they'll ask me similar questions. So and that's the question that's in the title, which is what kind of leftist am I? Like how do I identify politically? This is a question that is pretty interesting, and I think it's pretty important for me to kind of talk about, and it's something that I'm looking to sort of talk about maybe in a more fleshed out and composed way in like a future video, just kind of talking about what I do in my platform. But it's something that I think also will bear repeating over the course of me having this channel for however long I have it, or however long me and Denai are doing it, because it is something that is going to be, first of all, changing and shifting as time passes, because people's identities, people's feelings about things change, and I imagine mine will. But also just as a kind of reminder to new viewers or to older viewers, like what it is that I'm doing here at the end of the day, so that when you watch a video, when you watch one of the videos we do here, you see me articulate certain points, you see me share certain opinions, you come away kind of knowing, you have a reminder of that perspective that I have of what I'm trying to do, and any sort of critical analysis you do of my videos or feelings you have about it can be tempered by that, or like can be relative to that. So what kind of leftist am I? Now, this is a question that is asked to sort of the tune of picking certain labels, like there's a lot of different types of labels of ideologies within the left that range from anarchism, right? Like there's people who are anarchists, there's people who are Marxist Leninists, there's people who are strict like orthodox Marxists, there's people who are like all types of just names, right? And we kind of all come up with our own like sort of phraseologies and names of things at the end of the day, because we all have like little differences and little differences of opinion. That's kind of how it works in life. Everybody's gonna have a slightly different opinion, and that's fun. Now, it's something that I don't necessarily say a lot, which is why the question gets asked, because it's one of those things that I don't feel super strongly about in terms of identifying myself. Namely because, for one, I'm not like that well read. Like I think I sometimes give the impression that I'm a pretty like well read guy and knows all the things about all the things. At the end of the day, I don't. When I have hot takes on community posts, it's just me being crotchety at the end of the day half the time. Let me adjust this lighting. Sometimes it's just me being crotchety. It's not necessarily that I'm like knowledgeable about absolutely everything and I'm trying to deliver to you a fully articulated point. Sometimes I am venting. And, I think a lot of the times with the videos that I make, there are going to be feelings of like contradictions that I have, right? Like there's going to be certain things that I say that in another video that I'll make later on, or that in a video I had made previously, you can see some sort of ideological inconsistencies. And yeah, that's because in great part, I'm just not a person that's super like ideologically like entrenched in anything. I haven't really had the chance in my life to dig extremely deeply into different theory, into different political ideology, and sort of satisfy myself with coming away with saying like this is what I want to do. I've never really been in that position. I've always been like kind of reading things here and there, and there's certain theorists and philosophers, political figures that I lean towards more, and certain ones that I like in certain ways and dislike in other ways. But that being said, I'm really good at preambling. I know that there's a kind of desire for me to just like say like I'm this thing, and I'll try my best to do that. But like I said, it's not something that I'm super. It's not something that I feel super strongly about. Like, oh, I'm ideologically absolutely this. This is what I do. This is what I represent. I actually have a desire really to keep paving my kind of own thing, because I'm always finding little disagreements at different parts of different ideological sectors and different groups within the left. And I think I can generally say that I am a leftist. Yeah, I'm definitely like pretty lefty, but it's hard for me to feel like, oh yeah, this is my group, like this is the gang, this is it right here. So that's one thing. With that said, yeah, like I would say, first of all, I'm a leftist. I try, I think I can be pretty radical, but I try to be radical in the sense of being a person that like thinks critically about the world and continuously like tries to do something about it, rather than try to be radical in the sense of like, I know that if I'm on a political spectrum that other people can measure, I will be far, far in this end. I think that that's kind of it's just not how I see, like, I don't see the world in terms of like, this is how I stand, this is who I am, and then so whatever happens, like, this is where I'm going to be at. I kind of wish I was a little bit more like that, and that's something that I think will come with age. I'm only 26, but it's not something that I kind of feel. I kind of feel like whatever the situation is, then I'll kind of have maybe a little bit of a different position, because I really try to think about context. And I think that that's kind of also how you have to do leftism, how you have to do radicalism, how you have to do progressive, whatever kind of word you want to use. But particularly, like, the way that you do good politics is not by sort of entrenching yourself and saying like, this is my position, I'm going to make sure that all my positions fall in line with that sort of party line. But rather to say like, these are sort of my positions and feelings and the ways that I see the world. And then depending on the situation, I can make a determination for myself of like what I think is the best way to go. So for instance, like, I'm a person who, like, I support the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, but it's not because I think like that's my shit. It's just because I think they're a useful group, and the closest thing to sort of radical representation in electoral politics, especially on a larger scale in the United States. And I think that there's something useful about that. Like, I'll sometimes, I'm not the most engaged in electoral politics, but I will vote, especially like on the general elections. And I don't do that because it's like I'm a Democrat, but it's to say like, hey, probably better if we had Joe Biden in office than Donald Trump. That's the kind of decisions that are made sometimes. And I think that that's what life's about. It's not like every single, you're not going to make most of your decisions actually based on particularly like standing especially in line with a specific position. You have to make decisions of like what you prefer. And that's sort of how I try to see things. And that's part of why I have such a hard time kind of digging my heels into any one sort of party or like label. So here's some things that I can sort of say about what I am, what kind of leftist I am. For one, I would say that I'm a socialist, which again, general term, but I believe in socialism. I believe in a eventual, I want an eventual society, an eventual political and economic system wherein the collective has an ownership over the means of production, has an ownership over the resources, and evenly distributes it to each other according to what each person needs and wants. Now that's, of course, kind of a utopic idea, but that's the utopia that I think about, and that's what I try to base my thoughts in. How can we get closer to that? I want there, I think the more that we can be in a society that we get closer to socialism in some way, even if we never ever get there, then the better. Now, to just say that you're a socialist and that you believe in that is a pretty general thing and doesn't come with much. But a lot of the things that you get approached with when you say something like I'm a socialist or I'm a communist, and I'll make sort of a distinction as to why I don't call myself a communist in a sec. But sometimes you'll get people in your comment section saying, hey, well, I lived in Czechoslovakia. My parents are from Czechoslovakia, and socialism destroyed so many people. Like, socialism killed so many people. You get people from different parts of the world that have very sort of negative feelings about socialism and about socialist politics. And to that I say, my basis for believing in socialism is not because I think something specific happened in 1889 or 1998 or in 1975 that I think everybody has to do. It's I think that there's a specific thing that you're striving for when it comes to socialism, when it comes to a sort of democracy of the economy of material needs, that everybody's going to have different paths towards, and some paths are going to go better than others. Especially since I'm not a historian at the level that I would love to be, I'm not going to be able to sit there and tell you what happened in your country, or what happened in your parents' country, or what happened in specific countries at specific times. There's maybe some that I know a bit better about than others, but especially, for one, I'm a American. I'm in the United States. I've lived in the United States almost my entire life. So this is kind of what I know. I know about my country's politics and history, and I base my positions there. But generally, like for every country, I would like for there to be an equality in the distribution of resources. I would like there to be a material, sort of ownership, not necessarily a dictatorship of the proletariat, but an evenly distributed means like a production, like an evenly sort of an equality of material needs. I don't know how many more ways I can sort of say it. So yeah, I mean, I guess I'll keep articulating by like talking about the communism thing. I just don't necessarily call myself a communist. It's just because it's like a vibe thing. I think the differences between socialism and communism, and what communism actually is and what socialism actually is something that's so hotly debated that the way that I label myself is more based in how I would like to sort of reflect my positions towards others. And so I tend to label myself in a bit more of a tempered way by saying I'm a socialist, which is still pretty radical for a lot of people, rather than saying I'm a communist, because to say that I'm a communist a lot will invoke to a lot of people the idea that I am a hardcore like Marxist Leninist, hardcore tanky, that I support certain states that would consider themselves communists, or certain parties that would consider themselves communists, and it's just like it's just an aesthetic thing, frankly. I would like to sit there and say that I have a perfectly, beautifully, theoretically sound articulation of why I say socialism instead of communism, but in reality, it's just that the vibes are better if you say socialism. Am I anti-communism? No. I think communists have done amazing things. I think communism, some communists have done pretty bad things too. But I think that there's also just like a lot in the idea of communism that, I mean, the idea is that socialism is a sort of bridge to communism. And that communism is the ultimate like eradication of the state and of currency and of class. And I mean, that's pretty far out, right? And socialism itself is already far out enough. So I won't, it's like sort of, I guess I kind of lean myself towards looking a bit more like I'm thinking about a closer future. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of how I describe it. Now, am I, for instance, a Leninist, a Marxist Leninist? No, I think Lenin had some very powerful and insightful articulations of his particular struggle, and insights on how to do revolution, especially within the viewpoint, like within the situation of his particular struggle, of his people's particular struggle, that being Russia in the late 19th, early 20th century. I don't think that necessarily is a guideline to apply to every single struggle. I think, though, that there's a lot you can gain from reading Lenin, but I wouldn't call myself an ML. Would I consider myself a Maoist? Kind of similar things. I think Mao's writings and ideology, generally there's like a lot of interesting things there. I'm not super well read on it, but I'm not somebody that, first of all, because I'm not super well read on it, I'm not gonna fake, like I'm not gonna false flag. I'm not gonna act like I know and then say that that's what I am. And secondly, the conditions of the Chinese Civil War, the conditions of China's moving from a kingdom, moving from royalism, and its particular alignment of ownership towards a communist state, and the particular moves to make to do that, I don't necessarily see that as applying very strictly to this moment, and to my moment, and to what I'm trying to do, like with where I'm at. Would I consider myself an anarchist? I've been asked this before. There have been times where I've felt like I consider myself an anarchist. When I was a bit probably a year or two ago, I would probably call myself an anarchist. Currently, I don't, because there's a lot of great stuff in anarchism. There's a lot of great. I mean, there's anarchists that I'm friends with that I think are quite smart. And there's a lot to be gained from reading, for instance, from reading Malatesta, or there's a lot to be gained from reading Black anarchists, from learning about the Black Panthers, from learning about different particular movements that were influenced heavily by anarchism. And I have a great deal of respect, especially for the anarchists that basically do stuff. I mean, if you look historically, especially in the past 100 years, and especially within like the West, anarchists are the people that tend to do stuff the most. Whereas a lot of the folks that are more orthodox Marxist, let's say, or more statist, tend to either do very controversial things that may or may not be beneficial at all towards the cause, or tend to be more, book people and like debate people, more at home people. And anarchism lends itself, maybe it lends itself ideologically particularly more towards just getting out there and doing things, meaning like organizing types of direct action, organizing mutual aid, organizing types of gatherings to and political action to challenge oppressive states, oppressive regimes. So I think that that's one of those things that you have to bear in mind when you talk about. I'm turning the light back up. When you talk about anarchism, because I think anarchism gets a bad rap a lot of the times. And again, I don't call myself an anarchist, but I think that there's always going to be a need for some level of anarchism, frankly, because there's always going to be a level of necessity, as long as the world exists as it exists, for people that are extremely radical in questioning the system, and extremely radical in trying to invent new worlds and trying to invent new organizations of society that eradicate the harmful nature of power structures. But I don't call myself an anarchist, and here's why. For one, I don't have a particular amount of ease with the idea that hierarchy is itself the problem. I think hierarchy generally is a problem. But I don't necessarily like that kind of articulation of oppression as being, based in hierarchy, which some anarchists would propose, because I think hierarchy is one of those things that becomes a lot harder to sort of pin down when you look at real world applications. Is there a hierarchy that exists when certain people have more resources allocated to them because of their own material needs being more extensive? Because, for instance, they may have a physical disability or a mental disability, right? If you looked at like the amount of sort of state aid, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that that's what most anarchists or any anarchists would think of as being hierarchical, because those are people that are inherently marginalized in some way, or are disadvantaged in some way from participating in society, especially in current contexts. But there's also a way in which similar ideas of like hierarchically, these people benefit more, these people are placed at the top of the hierarchy. There's a certain degree to which that can be molded into all types of kind of reactionary ideas. I would say maybe a better example is that it's just when it comes to organization. For instance, if you're going to organize a party to challenge the state, if you're going to organize a party that would be like sort of, a democratic socialist party within New York, you're going to need a leader. Generally, if you don't have a leader, I think it struggles to be revealed. Like, it remains to be seen whether or not you can really build a strong party wherein there is no sense of hierarchy, at least in the sense of like who is the leader of this party, who represents the leadership group of this party, and that's one of those things that I think it's great and ambitious that a lot of people try to pursue that, but it's also kind of tricky because in reality, different people, right? Like different people have different strengths and weaknesses, and different people have different amounts of time and resources, especially in a present term sense, but just in a general sense, I think that that's just something that will always be the case. And so hierarchy or certain like levels of attention, levels of maybe power even, will exist depending on what the situation is and who has the strengths that are meant for it. To speak in a political sense, there are going to be certain people that are really good at delegating tasks, really good at projecting their voice and speaking loudly and being charismatic, really good at being able to understand economics and really good at being able to understand finance, right? There's certain people that are going to be way more interested in that and also maybe be, just more talented at that for whatever reason. And those folks are going to end up having certain levels of trust placed upon them as being those folks that will eventually, if not immediately, then eventually sort of condition them to be hierarchically advantaged or like higher in the hierarchy. It's easy to say like, let's have everybody participate evenly, but if 5 people are in a group and one person is the best at both communicating in public and also allocating tasks, which sometimes you just have to admit when some people are better at certain things, does the group itself really excel or accomplish its tasks very well if that person has to step back from participating in those tasks very much in order for other people to just participate more? I mean, it's kind of like a basketball team. Like if everybody takes the most shots, like everybody takes an even amount of shots, you're likely going to have some problems because certain people should be shooting more than others. And it's not to, and I understand that a certain response to that is for one, like, well, each person gets allocated different responsibilities. That doesn't necessarily make them better in the hierarchy. And I understand that, but that's not necessarily how it works, right? Because even though factually and knowledge and in a type of logical sense, yes, that is true, that just because somebody has a specific role that is seen as more of a leadership role doesn't mean that they are that they necessarily have the biggest role and that they necessarily are the highest in the hierarchy. Even though that's logically consistent and understandable, it doesn't pan out when it comes to sort of the urgency of organizing tasks, especially high pressure tasks, right? Because if one person is needed in order to get a thing done more than another person, then that person is going to be privileged in terms of the amount of attention that they get, and that person is going to be relied upon in terms of the amount of labor that they do or the amount of work that they do. So I think that makes sense. But either way, I think anarchism has a lot of very enriching ideas, and I certainly look to be reading more and learning more from anarchists and respect a lot of great anarchist thinkers. But I don't particularly identify as one because I think, especially when you come across certain, like, perhaps less savory, less good elements in anarchism, like worse actors in anarchism than just like the best thinkers and the coolest people that are anarchists. There are people who are mean and bad that are anarchists too, and they kind of reveal, if not necessarily a larger issue, then they kind of also make it harder to sort of associate with anarchism because they just figure as the kind of people that you don't necessarily want to be in community with or work with. So that's, I think, how I'll articulate that. I would say that in general, overall, if I were to describe myself, I would describe myself as a socialist. I would probably describe myself as a Marxist because I read Marx and I like a lot of what Marx does. And I think Marx has a lot of insights that are really important and really useful, especially if you go to Marx, go to the source himself, and go to, like, I think this is the best scholars for understanding him. People like David Harvey, for instance. There's a lot of really good, Twitter accounts, frankly, like not even just Twitter accounts, but they're like real scholars that tweet really good stuff or really interesting insights. Like, for instance, Will Paris, William Clare Roberts, Olufemi Taiwo. There's a lot of just really smart people that are Marxists or that are very heavily influenced by and respectful of Marx, that I rock with and that I get most of my shit from, frankly, that I get most of my insight from. And I think one of the things that like will illustrate to people what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Marx, I think people like, I would suggest that people read like Mike Davis. Mike Davis was a urban theorist who recently passed away like a year or two ago. He was more than an urban theorist. He was a scholar. He was a larger political theorist. Excuse me. He was an historian. And what he did was a type of Marxist geography, kind of like what David Harvey does, kind of like what I'm forgetting her name. What's her name? Oh, it's on the top of my what's her name? Oh, golly. I was just Ruth Wilson Gilmore. Sorry. Ruth Wilson Gilmore. Marxist geographers are the people that I take maybe the most interest in reading. And what I mean by that is people who look at geography from a lens of Marxism and Marxist analysis. And a lot of times what they do is write these really insightful texts looking at the histories of particular places in the world and how the economic formations and superstructures emerged within those parts of the world. And what Mike Davis does, for instance, in the book that I've been reading, Prisoners of the American Dream, is describe sort of how the American left has never been able to build strong class politics and has essentially failed, right? Like this conversation that people have about like, why is the left failing? Why is the left not doing well or whatever? What does the left need to do? These are things that Mike Davis was writing about many years ago, like in the late 80s in that book. And I think he articulates super intelligently and super profoundly and knowledgeably the different histories that made it so that class politics just didn't emerge. And, maybe I should go in a separate diatribe about what I mean by class politics and what he talks about. But why sort of class consciousness struggles to emerge within the United States. And I think these are the kinds of writers that I would really love for people to read. I'm also a huge fan of Paulo Freire, who is a Brazilian educator. And he was very influenced by Marx. He was very influenced by different philosophers. And he built, his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is maybe my favorite book because it analyzes and outlines sort of a philosophy of education that talks about liberating people. And that's kind of what I care about is liberation, right? All these different forms and all these different labels of leftism. Ultimately, what's the most important thing to me is liberation. And what do I mean by that? I mean people like liberating from of human beings from social and economic structures of oppression, liberating them as human beings, in terms of their hearts and minds, and in terms of their material realities that have a very big influence on their hearts and minds. So that's pretty wordy stuff. But yeah, I would generally say I am a leftist. I would call myself a socialist. I call myself a Marxist. And one more thing is I would say that I'm Buddhist, and I know that that's a religion, but my interest right now is understanding, first of all, becoming a better Buddhist, because I've recently adapted it as a religion, and I'm learning a lot about it, about the Dharma, and I find it extremely helpful, extremely insightful, and extremely true. But moreover, I'm interested in incorporating Buddhism into what I do, and into my politics. I think that there's, if not, spiritual, I wouldn't say even spiritual ideas, and I would hesitate to even say religious ideas. But generally, there are ideas, there are insights in Buddhism as a religious practice, as a philosophy, whatever, that are really useful in the context of socialism, in the context of being a socialist, in the context of being a Marxist. And there is a struggle, and a lot of y'all have watched my McMindfulness video about Buddhism, so you'll kind of know where I'm getting at with this, in part. There's a struggle for sure among especially popular Buddhist texts and popular Buddhism to have a type of radical politics, and to kind of declare a type of radical politics. But if you do the research, you will find stuff. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much for the donation. There is, some great stuff out there. Recently, I haven't gotten a chance to dig into too much, so let me hesitate when I say great, because I can't vet stuff. But there's some really interesting stuff out there that talks about connections between Buddhism and Marxism, or Buddhism and Leftism, Buddhism and Socialism, Buddhism and liberation, Buddhism and anti-oppression. And I think that there's a lot there. And it's not a coincidence that, honestly, Christianity made up, that Christianity had such a profound impact. Obviously, in the negative ways that people talk about in terms of being used as a tool of oppression, but Christianity was also a source through which a lot of leftist movements gained power and made real gains in society, particularly in Latin America, to the point where Pope Benedict dedicated himself as a right-wing pope to sort of shutting these things down. When we talk about that briefly in liberation theology in our video about Buddhism, I think you can see some of the text there and some of the stuff there, but I think people underestimate the scale to which the needs that religious folks met, that these particular liberation theologists and priests met within these areas of Latin America, often poor areas, for them to meet those needs of these people and to use their religion as a guide to being radical in understanding that a state that operates in the way that it does, a world that operates in the way that it does, a global economy, a global politic that operates in the way that it does, could never cohere with Christianity, could never cohere with the teachings of the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ. They were able to make so much ground. They had there was a very famous priest, I think his name is Oscar Sáenz, who was instrumental in Mexico in sort of preventing the Zapatista rebellion from being violently destroyed or violently, prevented a great deal of violence against Zapatistas, although there's still been violence, there still is violence against Zapatistas in Mexico. But there was a way in which he used his platform to sort of not both sides things in this sort of enlightened centrist way, but to sort of speak to both sides and allow for a type of peaceful communication. There's a type of validity and a veracity and an honor as well that a lot of people connote with religious figures, which allow them to be so prominent, so powerful when they're able to take political stands. And so I think that while atheism and agnosticism are popular for a reason, and being irreligious is popular among a lot of leftists for a reason, because a lot of religion can kind of quash rationalism, can kind of quash rationality and quash a sort of radical view of the world based on what's actually happening. and put it into this sort of idea of faith of like God is going to fix everything, and etc., etc. I think if you look at history, you'll see that like that's not necessarily the case, and that there have been instances in which religious figures have been hugely instrumental in making some levels of gains for leftist causes, for anti-capitalist causes, right? And that is sort of another thing I would say to describe myself as like I'm an anti-capitalist. I mean, I'm not an anti-capitalist positionally, maybe more just ideologically, but you know, I am a pretty first world guy, I guess you could say. But yeah, I'm not into capitalism. And so in the subject of Buddhism, it's like, what if we did this with Buddhism, right? Like it's this idea of like, there's so much insight, like general insight in like how to operate your life as a human and how to treat others. And in particular, I think the concept of non-duality, non-dualism is so insightful and so potentially powerful for people with a radical politics that I think it could transcend even needing to be a part of a religion, and more so be a type of have a type of superstructural influence, or a type of like ideological influence in leftist movements and activism in the left that could be really useful for people, not only just because like it can be really helpful in articulating what we are to do about our struggles, right? Like how we are to unify, how we are to organize, etc. But I also do think there is some degree to which self-help is good on the left, right? Like I'm not a person that's like the left needs to do self-help. If you like doing self-help and you're a leftist, then do it. That's more my thing. But we cannot ignore the fact that, first of all, most of us that are on the left are pretty depressed, pretty anxious, very much struggling with a direction in our lives, very much struggling against a type of hopelessness and a meaninglessness. And I think Buddhism has really helped me articulate that without having me believe in something that I don't believe in, without formulating ideas of like, this is exactly what you have to believe in. These are exactly the words you have to say. This is exactly what God is, and you must believe it. You must vow to it, or else you're not truly a believer. Buddhism is almost anti-belief, in that it talks. It doesn't try to tell you that there's certain things that exist spiritually. It tries to tell you more so how to operate, and it gives you a framework for how to understand why you should operate in that way. But there's a reason why secular Buddhism is quite popular nowadays, is that like, even if you don't feel strongly about the sort of spiritual imagery that is a part of a lot of Buddhism, you can still practice it because you can understand the ideas of Buddhism as being much larger than that, much more down to like a real rationality almost, and a real like knowledge, a real understanding of the world, versus just like, here's God, here's what he looks like, this is the word you say, this is the prayer you say. So that was really great about Buddhism for me. I also think Buddhism is extremely useful against anxiety. Dharma is like built on like, Buddhist Dharma is built on like helping people deal with their anxieties and their suffering. And if we're going to, first of all, do good things for other people and organize, then we're going to need to not be miserable all the time. We're going to need to have the motivation and energy and peace inward to be healthy and to get out of bed, to smile at people and to give them kindness. And if we're not able to do that, then we could just kind of forget about doing a lot of this shit, because most of us are just going to be too miserable. You need a type of energy, right? You need motivation in order to do things. And I think Buddhism allows you to sort of deal with the suffering that you're feeling inside about the world, gives you a knowledge and an understanding of it, and then also allows you to sort of meditate and be mindful and heal yourself, and heal those things that are making you struggle so much emotionally and mentally. So yeah, for me, Buddhism is a big part of what I try to do here nowadays, especially. Sometimes it figures into what I write more than other times. If I were to name certain things that have the most influence on what I do, excuse me, and what I like write with my scripts, and how I, the beliefs that I articulate on here. Paulo Freire is a huge part of that in terms of even just certain sections of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, not even the whole book. Marx, and Buddhism, and Marxist geography. Like those are things that I look at a lot right now. And ultimately, also, I'm not like some sort of authority on any of this. This is sort of my way of looking at these things, and I'm not going to allow myself to stop or force myself to just stop writing these articles, writing these essays, I should say, making these videos with Deny. I'm not going to just like force myself to stop because I'm like, I'm not there enough. I don't know enough. I'm not perfectly able to articulate exactly what label I have and exactly every bit of information that I need to have. Partially because I have to do this as a career, as a job, as a way to pay bills, but also partially because there's things that I can say, like with the knowledge that I do have. So yeah, I went in a lot of different directions there, but you can kind of describe me as a Buddhist socialist. You can kind of describe me as a Buddhist Marxist. You can kind of describe me as a socialist, as a Marxist, but generally you can just describe me as me. And what I do here is a type of journalism and a type of just essayist work, essay work, just articulating different ideas that I have and things that happen. Describing things that happen and giving you my vibes and my thoughts and my feelings about them. So it's just like, it's YouTubing, Yeah, so that's my sort of big rant about what kind of leftist I am and what my ideology is. I hope I opened eyes for you a bit. Now I'm going to look at the chat before I dive into the community post questions. So Michael Moldenhauer has sent me like a bunch of questions, which I'll get to in a second. I want to say hello to Julian, of course. Julian's in the chat. Yeah, so weren't the Black Panthers ML or MLM? They had a kind of mix of different ideologies. Ultimately, the Black Panthers could be best described as being the Black Panthers. It sounds to me like you just need to read more anarchist theories. There's answer to all these things. I mean, you may be right. Anti-Antifa. I'm definitely not anti-Antifa, because I am anti-fascist, so I would be Antifa in that case. I agree anarchism does interesting analysis of power structures that aren't considered in Marxist literature. Yeah, I would say that. Red Menace is a great podcast on Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I might check that out. Thank you for the suggestion. Hopefully the talking leads to organizing and helping out the people in your communities. I'm not sure what that was a response to, but I think I generally would agree with that. Thank you, Katakesh, for the well wishes. What do you think this implies about Marx's famous dictum of religion is just an opium of the people? Would you think this tends to show that as an oversimplistic conclusion? I think religion can definitely be an opium of the people. I also think we have a weird relationship sometimes with drugs and with media and art and the present. I think one thing that I kind of, both in Buddhist, in Dharmic texts and in leftist texts across Marxism and anarchism, one thing that I have a hesitation about is the amount of importance that is placed on a type of purity of a pure human experience that leads to people kind of being very dismissive of things like medication and drug usage and alcohol usage and consumption of certain media, like media diet. It seems like most of what you hear people say when it comes to and I kind of made a post that was kind of saying this in a more dismissive way. But for instance, if you go on Reddit critical theory, or if you read certain texts, I read this text by, I think his name is Jacopo Bernardini about infantilization while preparing to do my video. And I remember at one point he's talking about infantilization sort of as this process that happens to people because that is placed in people through media to sort of move them away from having a sense of agency. And I was like, cool. General kind of critical theory, media stuff, media analysis stuff. And then he just kind of keeps going and talks about men, why grown adults wear sneakers, and it just gets to this point where you're like, wait a minute, at what point do you, like, who gets to decide, like, what's an adult thing to wear? What's an adult thing to watch? What's the mature thing to watch? What's the mature thing to say and listen to? I think we spend way too much time sort of judging harshly what people put in their bodies and what people put in their ears and in front of their eyes. I don't think people are lacking radicalism because they watch Marvel movies. I don't think people are lacking in radicalism because they take drugs, because they smoke weed. Clearly not, because a lot of y'all do, and a lot of y'all are lefty, because they drink alcohol, because they do any of these things. I don't think people can be unradical just because they're part of a fandom, you know, which kind of gets lambasted a lot by lefty. Oh, fandom is like it's like fake collectivism, da da da. It's like, sure, and to a degree you're right, but also you can be, you know, a stan of Ice Spice and also believe that, like, you should, like, liberate yourself from oppression, you know, that like capitalism is bad, right? There's ways that you could do all of this stuff. It's a matter of, like, how you do it. And we kind of take shortcuts sometimes ideologically, to try to be prescriptive and try to say, like, well, it's because this and this is happening with our media and with our consumption of things and with our particular belief systems, going back to sort of your question, that make us, like, continue to fool us, continue to sort of put us in this spiral of you know, false needs and bad ideologies and bad ideas about the world, and like condition ourselves to be asleep to all the things that are actually happening, and like fake a false sense of community. And it's like, dude, like, I don't think that any of that is really good commentary. Like, I think some of it, like, I mean, some of it is maybe, and sure, I'm down for a good old jolting of media sometimes, a good old harsh criticism of media. But, like, at the end of the fucking day, if people like there are going to be people that are socialists that just watch Marvel movies. Like, it is what it is. There are going to be people who are socialists that are Christians, and there are going to be people that are socialists that are Muslim, and there are going to be people that are socialists that are heavy drinkers, you know. I don't think we do a good job, because we kind of almost assert this idea that, like, you lack a pure sense of the ideology if you're tempering your brain with participating enthusiastically in these institutions. And it's like, everybody does that to some extent. It's called survival. It's called existing in a society that actually exists. And existing in the society and participating in it with a smile on your face does not mean that you agree with the way that the order is done, like that you agree with the social order, that you agree with the economic and political order. It just means that you're able to adjust. It means that you're able to find the positive in things. And there's a lot of people that are, you know, that you might think of as naive because of their religious beliefs or because of their media consumption, that in actuality are just like one or two hops and skips from being radical as you are. And maybe you just need to reach out to them, you know? Maybe you just need to listen to them, because there's also going to be certain things that they might do that you don't do, that you have, like, decided in your part of the brain, just like they have decided in their part of their brain, well, there are problematic aspects to this, but I will still enjoy it and participate in it. You know, you can't be a person who eats meat like I am and then judge people for watching Marvel, because what are you like that's poisoning your brain, or like whatever kind of thing. You can't be a person like who like watches, you know, Marvel movies, or watches like Barbie, or watches, you know, daytime television or primetime television, or watches sports, and then also judge the guy who's a Muslim because that's, you know, you're ideologically tainting. You know, everybody has their things, and some of those things are going to be rooted in the society, and the society is going to be imbalanced and oppressive. Okay, the point is not that you just eschew, almost like an ascetic, any level of participation and enjoyment of the things that exist around you, and any level of even belief that those things can have positive impacts, because they can. You know, at the end of the day, they can have positive impacts in people's personal lives. People get a lot of great things from fandom. People get a lot of great things from enjoying a nice party with drinks in them. Um, you can't sit there and say like, well, that has led you to down the wrong path. It's just not anybody's call. It's also just a fucking waste of time. You could either sit there and try to establish what the problem is with media that makes everybody dumb, or you could actually go out there and talk to people. You could stop being such a parihuayo and go out there and talk to people, and you don't have to like what they like or agree with what they agree with, but you can listen to what their needs are and what their desires are, and you can find ways to angle your political work towards that. Like, that's what good politics is. And if there's anything that's a problem with the left, first of all, it's that the left is small, and the people who have power are big and strong and have way more stuff than us. So that's kind of part of the thing we signed up for, is being in the minority and having less resources. But secondly, if there's a problem with the left, it's that most motherfuckers are busy thinking about what the problem is with the left and how it's other people, and not just going out there and doing leftist politics. Good politics is organization of people, organization of relations between people. And so if you do that, then you'll get things done. And if you don't, then you won't. And that's kind of, so when it comes to the Marxist dictum that the religion is just an opium of the people, I do think that that's a dismissive way of putting things. I don't think it's necessarily 100% wrong. I mean, you can definitely look at a lot of people's habits and the way that they practice their religion and say, hey, motherfucker, you're using religion to pacify yourself and like convince yourself that all these things are good that are actually not good. But in the like the thing is, sometimes people will make those critiques, and it's like, you know, that they're saying that in a provocative way to argue something. They're not necessarily going to be the same. They're not necessarily saying don't ever talk to a Muslim or don't ever talk to a fucking Christian. They're probably friends with religious people, but they're saying those things to provoke a sense of like critical thinking and to say like, you know, their own personal feelings about something that they think is harmful. I just think like, nah, like I'm not particularly interested in that. Like, so for me, Buddhism like has a lot of fuel in it, just like Christianity has had a lot of positive correlations with like leftist movements as well as negative ones. I think Buddhism has had a lot of negative relations with like, you know, radical movements, but also has positive ones and can have way more positive ones if we start thinking that out. And that's kind of what I try to do. This is why I was wondering if you could then say the same about broader right-wing thought, i.e. doing both sides in the right way instead of the enlightened centrism way. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I think it's just such a broad idea, because right-wing can mean so many different things and left-wing can mean so many different things, that there's just kind of no way that I could articulate a good answer to that. I think the bigger idea is like, you know what, I'm interested in socialism and liberation. And if there's an idea that somebody who's right-wing espouses that I think is actually correct and is in line with my desires, my political beliefs, then I'm going to kind of work with it. And if there's something that somebody who's on my side of things, even somebody who I always agree with on my side of things as a leftist, says that I think is counterintuitive and goes against what we're doing, what I want to do or what I believe in, then I'm going to criticize it. And that's just the way I go about that. The Santia Soke in Thailand are an interesting intersection of Buddhism and opposing materialist accumulation. If memory serves, they practice a sort of spiritual meritocracy to oppose capitalism. It's quite interesting. I'm going to look into it. Managing Buddhism, I mentioned it too when it comes to the nice versus mean thing. Oh, I lost that. Its speech ethics seems to do an excellent, not impeccable job of answering that. Buddhism doesn't disprove a god, rather it warns about the dangers of partisanship. Yeah, it does. Are you going to make a video about leftism x Buddhism? Potentially. It's something that I'm going to keep in mind for the future. Yeah, social skill. Exactly, Michael. You got to be good at people stuff. You know? That's politics is people, things. It's about things between people. So if you want to do things, you have to be good at people things. Does that make sense? Like, you have to have good social skills. You have to know how people think. Well, you have a good sense of what people think and what they want. In great part by going out and asking them, and then you have to figure out how you can address those things so that they can come on your side, because they'll trust you and they won't have the same tethered the same connections to things that aren't good, that will make them think bad things. Do you know what I mean? That's what it is. That's what it is. I'm a radical socialist because I'm cool and have lots of friends. Exactly, Zan. Brett from the Rev Left Radio podcast has done some talking about socialism and Buddhism. That also was a great suggestion. Thank you. What kind of Buddhist texts have you been reading? I'm interested in it, but I don't know where to start. I really like What the Buddha Taught by Dr. Walpola Rahula. And I also I've been reading on and off Thich Nhat Hanh's book, What the Heart of Buddha's Teaching. What did I miss? A lot. Thank you so much, Onrel, for the love. No yucking anyone's yum. We should be anti-sectarian wholesale. Yeah, I think that the idea of sectarianism that I talk about, that Freire proposes, is quite useful in that way. Stop prescribing. Stop the incessant prescriptivism of this is how the world works and this is why everything is this bad and it's going to be this bad, and instead just attune yourself to the radical possibility that exists everywhere. We can agree beans are good. Yeah, I understand why you call yourself a socialist broadly. I call myself a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist because I feel it provides the ideological clarity that is needed in the left to actually push progress forward. Yeah, I think that's where a lot of people come from when they're MLs, when they're Maoists, when they're Leninists, is the sense of you can believe in a certain ideology of anti-capitalism but not be doing anything about it and kind of be relying on all these bad tactics to do it. Or you could look at the people that have actually done something about it and say, hey, we should try to do something like this. My only thing is just you had to shape that a lot, though, based on context and based on understanding that there are, I think it's safe to say there were some mistakes made in different revolutions and in different states that have, established themselves as communist or as aiming to be communist. That Marx quote always feels like it's taken... what's that said? Marx quote always feels like it's taken not in the full context of what Marx is getting at. That kind of happens a lot with Marx. Homie, I live in DR where the devil's lettuce is highly illegal and all my lefty homies are highly vegetarians, if you know what I mean. Que loca. Yeah, la hierba is very important for a lot of people. Hey, motherfucker. It doesn't necessarily mean mechanically applying the strategy of 20th century Chinese revolution in today, but more of the clarifications that Mao made on New Democracy, United Front strategies, mass line method of organizing, etc. Yes, that makes a lot of sense, comrade. Hey, Elliot, how are things? I'm great, Aronok. How are you? I fucks with the mental health chat. I was fired for unionizing in Amazon in Kentucky, and it's taken such a toll struggling all this time. I'm glad that you're taking, that you fucks with the mental health chat, and I hope that I can help you more with that, and I salute you for your situation. It's a struggle, but I believe that you can do, you can feel better and you will feel better. I guess is what I'll say. Thank you for recommendations. What is the responsibility of the level of socially inept or less apt people in this regard then? Well, you can either choose to do something. There's things you can do that are also not specifically politics in the sense of working with people, but that have good political implications. You could just do services for people, right? You can learn a trade, be really good at that trade, and then participate in movements that can utilize your trade in a specific different way, or unionize your trade, etc. You can be an electrician and then you can help out political events by offering services of electrician work for cheap. Sectarianism is counter-revolutionary. I think that's a pretty safe, a pretty good way of articulating it. What if those very beliefs harm somebody else with their own beliefs? I'm not sure what exactly you mean, because I'm not sure what you're responding to. I'm surviving, just finishing part 2 of Turb in my coverage of Jubilee. We talk about transphobia. It was not fun to make, but it's a good conversation. Well, I look forward to checking it out. It sounds pretty badass, Aronok. And hopefully you can take some time to unwind. What radicalism books do you recommend? Just stuff that I've mentioned before. So Pedagogy of the Oppressed is a book that I tell people to read a lot. So read that. Capital Volume 1. Read that. Yeah, so let's do the Q&A questions. You're biking in the sunshine listening to me, Margo? That's sick. Fucking dope. All right, so Rachel or Rebecca asks, recently had a conversation with a friend about the crazy growth that happens during one's 20s. So I'm curious to ask, how do you feel different from your childhood self versus current self, and what's still the same? So, for me, there's a lot of differences. Generally, the older I get, the kind of happier I get, because the more agency that I've gotten and the more successes that I've gotten in doing things on my own, the more happy I've been with myself, and the more that I've been able to sort of take time to unpack my own struggles and the things that I deal with, and like heal, and like learn. So I think that my childhood self, so I definitely struggled a lot mentally with depression and anxiety. I wasn't the most unhappy kid, but I definitely had some very unhappy, very low self-worth, very, just down moments. And a lot of it came from sort of social rejection and loneliness. A lot of it came from not having proper insight on my own condition as a, I guess you could say a neurodivergent person. Just a person with a brain that works a certain way, man. And I kind of always knew that I had that, but I couldn't figure out what to do about it, and just felt really shitty about myself. And I also really wanted to just like make a big impression on the world and like become this really successful like rapper, and like be a superstar, and have everybody love me, and like it's just like really dumb, like just those kinds of ideas that you cling to when you're a kid and you're very insecure. And the older that I've gotten, the more and more I've been like happiness is the process. It's not the place you get to. Like, it's not the destination, it's the journey. You be happy in the moments, and then it leads to wherever you're going. But like, additionally, those things that I struggled with made me do a lot of bad things. I mean, like, the truth is, if you don't check the things you're struggling with, and you don't make efforts to heal and connect with people about them, then you can turn into a very bitter person. You can turn into a very negative person, seeking refuge in like catharsis and escapism, and like just hurting people's feelings and manipulating them and lashing out at them as a way to get the feeling of like some sort of power and some sort of joy. And so I would say like my teenage years, I became just this bitter person, this very awkward person who didn't want to be awkward, who wanted to be loved, and just kind of lashed out at people that I wanted to love me more than I thought that they did. It made me a person that was pretty harmful towards like my friends at times. And I made like, some mistakes that I don't feel good about. But I also did good things too. And I was a person who was like struggling with how to be a good person, and I didn't know a lot. And I was, just because I was selfish and a shitty person didn't mean that I wasn't also sometimes a good person, and wasn't also like, like hopeless, it just was a process that I had to go through. And like, being a good person is a process. Like, my friend Gray told me once a long time ago that good isn't something you are, it's something you do. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in adulthood, is like, oh shit, like I can't just rest on this idea like that I'm a good person and then just justify everything I do under that guise. Like, yeah, I'm a good person, so whatever, I did the thing, whatever I did, like I did it because it was the right thing to do, or if it wasn't the right thing to do, then it wasn't my fault. Maturity of adulthood in great deal is realizing like, no, I actually have to do good things, and if I don't do good things, then it doesn't matter who I am and how I identify myself, like whether I think I'm a good person or not. And that was one of the biggest clarifications I had of being an adult. It's just being like, hey, make good decisions to like be a good person to yourself and others. And also like let go of these really ridiculous ambitions. They're harming you. it's nothing good comes from like identifying every bit of your happiness with like this destination, like this place that you're gonna get to. As soon as I open that door and get to that room, I will be happy. That's never a good idea. Try to find happiness in who you are right now and where you are right now. And if you do that, and if you try to be a good person and be happy, it will be a struggle, but it will be worth it, like, because those things are inherently connected. And the older I've gotten, the more that I've sort of felt that too. And that's where the non-dualism comes back in, baby. So yeah, I'm much happier with who I am now. I still have a lot of work to do and a lot of things to do, but it's about a process. It's not about like you being a specific person necessarily when you're 15 versus when you're 26. Yeah, you change, and yeah, there are certain things that are fixed and that or that are like less like move slower. But ultimately, good is something you do, and so yeah, I think the older that I've gotten, the more peace I've gotten in myself, and the more that I've allowed myself to just do good things when I can. Well, I always can, but like just to do good things, and like, sometimes you're not perfect. Jaguar, Kayla, were you born in New York? If so, that's honestly really cool. I never lived or been to a city, so cities always fascinate me. Also, if not, I'm still happy for you, Elliot. Also, if in the future you can move anywhere, where would it be? Yes, I was born in New York City. I love New York City. I probably will leave it at some point. I would like to go, I wouldn't know, but like to another city. I would love to. I just don't want to not live in the city, because cities are great. Fuck what anybody says. Cities are awesome. That said, let me do this. That said, if I were to move anywhere, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. But yeah, I was born in New York and I've lived here most of my life. Old YouTubers have been on my mind. This is Nublet. What's up, Nublet? OG. Old YouTubers have been on my mind lately for multiple reasons. Lol. So what veteran YouTubers did you watch growing up? Yeah, so and shout out to McKenna Vieira Lewis and their comments. I'll also respond to that. Veteran YouTubers I watched growing up. When I was young, I used to watch Ryan Higa. I used to watch Timothy Chaturangsu. Timothy De La Ghetto is what he used to call himself, which is a bit of an unfortunate name. But like, yeah. I used to watch a lot of rappers, a lot of battle rap. So a lot of Smack URL, a lot of Grind Time. I used to watch. Are there any vloggers or like other YouTubers that I used to watch? Oh, I used to really love Community Channel. I used to watch a bunch of her videos. So those are some of the videos I used to watch. I used to watch the Young Turks again, like reasons. Like woof. Yikes. In that same vein, because I've been thinking about people like Ryan Higa and Smosh since they bought back their company, and what happened to the sketch comedy format of YouTube content. I watched some of Ryan and Smosh's old videos. While they aren't funny to me anymore, I can recognize the effort and creativity, especially Ryan's, in their content. I appreciated that none of it was serious and it was meant to be stupid, because I feel like that kind of stuff is lacking now. Is TikTok the place for that kind of content now? Is there really a safe place for young people to be stupid and creative online at this point? Just want to hear your thoughts. Yeah, I think TikTok has kind of occupied that space, and I think the humor has changed a lot because of the context. The context has changed a lot. A lot of the old sketch comedy was very like lol random, or very like basic joke, like basic like edgy joke. Nowadays the jokes are still edgy, but they're edgy in a different way. They're edgy in like a commentary on like people's depressions and anxieties. They're edgy in commentary about things being bad in society, and ironic detachment. So that's like a thing that kids are doing, and I think that as far as whether there's a safe place, I mean, YouTube wasn't a safe place for kids to be goofy. There was a lot of clearly there were a lot of creators that were predatory towards kids, or at the very least not very healthy in their relationships with their audiences, and that kind of happens online all the time. It happens offline too. Unfortunately, it's a part of life that when we don't get our shit together, we create these spaces and people that are not good, and then they have access to our kids, and then that turns into not good things. So yeah. At the risk of sounding like a Mormon missionary, have you heard of solar punk? It's a really neat movement about envisioning the future as sustainable in terms of environment, work, and urban design and community. I think the use of fiction as a form of activism and even self-discovery and improvement is a good topic, and I think the world needs more visions of futures to actually strive for that feel and look nice. To strive for that actually feel and look nice. Yeah, I've heard of solar punk. I've seen some of Andrewism's work on it. I don't know a ton more beyond that. I think it's very cool. I think that it is one of those things. Yeah, I think that if you want to use fiction or use like sort of these maybe utopian, you could say, aesthetic and ideological constructs of like what the future would look like. Oh, enjoy the Spider-Verse, deny. That would be like that can be a really good way to get to people, because sometimes people are really compelled by that. And I think generally this idea of like sustainability, I think solar punk goes hand in hand a lot with degrowth, very much so. And degrowth is something that I'm very interested in, but I don't know a lot about. I think this idea of making sure you prioritize sustainability, sustainable construction, sustainable architecture, sustainable environments, and sustainable relationships with other people that engage with the environment in those ways. I think that's a great idea. I think that that's something we should try to embody in our own lives right now. And it's going to be hard to do so, but yeah, I just think it's very cool is what I would say. Even though my family and I want to live outside of the Bronx, it's been interesting. The Bronx is a lovely place from what I understand, but very interesting. Politics is something you do, not something you are. Being is active. Ironok, yeah, you're right. Praxis does literally mean the dialectical relationship between practice and theory, both reinforcing each other. You can't just have one without the other. This is something that's very true. This is something Freire says. And that sometimes I get people on the channel who kind of push back against the idea of reading theory. Sometimes you see it sometimes where people are like, well, why do I have to read Marx? Why do I have to read this and this? And I understand that viewpoint to a degree, but I don't see a reason why you should just like not engage with stuff that could be really insightful. You know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of great insight there, scientifically speaking, historically speaking, like histories, social relations, psychology, philosophy, and so much of these things that are very, very helpful, not only in terms of like how we see ourselves politically and like how we engage politically, but like how we engage just in our personal lives. I've said this before, reading theory or what can be considered to be theory has been super helpful for me in terms of like understanding my own life and like feeling better about certain things and like feeling better about myself, you know? And like that's not necessarily like what it's there for, but it's helpful. Like it is a thing, you know? Like it is a thing, and like that's what happens when you gain knowledge about things, right? Have a great day tomorrow, Elliot. Thank you. Kayla. I wonder what Elliot thinks is so yikes about TYT though I prefer secular talk and leftist mafia. The weird transphobic moment that they just had recently was not great. Don't understand, like I don't know too much about anything else that they've done recently, but I also have felt like their politics have always been kind of sometimes a little bit reactionary. You know, Cenk has said a lot of reactionary things. You know, I remember from when when I was watching it back in 08, 09, like that he would say certain things about like let's just say inappropriate relationships between adult women and child boys, like you know, they definitely have some yikesness. They've always been a little bit yikes, but they've always you know, the transphobia moment that they had, that was not great. And like I don't think that they are necessarily raging TERFs, but they definitely have indicated in terms of how they handled those criticisms that they got. They definitely handled it in a way of like, okay, it looks like you're going in this direction, so not good. No problem, Kayla. Typos happen. I'm not sure, personal advice. I'm not sure if I have ADHD or if I'm just a product of today's society. I'm also starting to draw links between just having a certain personality type. But either way, my brain is constantly racing at 50 directions at once. and I haven't been able to finish any studies after high school because I just can't focus. Do you think I should push for an investigation to try getting medication? I've been back and forth with the thought because I don't want to depend on drugs, but then I keep hearing how it helped others to focus, and it seems too good to be true for me. Excuse me. To be honest, I find it strange how someone can just say who needs it and not by just talking to the patient. It feels like something that's too abstract to be medicated for, but seems to work for others. Sending love and support to you and everything you do. So first of all, I suggest to everybody like medication. Anybody that I think is inhibiting signs of ADHD, trouble focusing, emotional sensitivity, physical sensitivity, lethargic, that they try to get their hands on some Adderall, which is not very easy right now. But also there's other ADHD drugs that will work for some people, Wellbutrin, Ritalin. Medication is not a bad thing. What you need to do with medication is be careful to make sure you research what it interacts with if you're taking multiple medications, what kind of side effects it can have, how it works, so that you know when you go in what kind of effect it has on your body. But like the big thing, and this goes to what I was talking about earlier with like the prescriptivism, the sectarianism, the thing that people do when they're just like, this is bad, this will corrupt you, this will make you worse. People do this with medication a lot. It's not about whether or not you take a certain medication. Like, it doesn't make any sense to just be like, well, you can get addicted from medication, so don't take medication. Like, you can get addicted from anything, really, but like, you're gonna use that same energy to tell people to not drink. I doubt it. A lot of people just doubt that, right? You're gonna use that same energy when you talk about people's diet. People shouldn't eat like fatty foods or whatever. Like, it doesn't make sense. The things you put in your body have an effect on your body. Some of those effects are going to be positive. Some will have better and more positive effects on your body than others. But in general, your body needs a combination of a lot of different things to function well in a lot of different ways. Whether it's something from like as basic as sunlight to something as basic as specific nutrients that you might be deficient in. And so if you're deficient in something, like if you have a trouble with, for instance, what we're talking about with ADHD and ADHD-like symptoms, if you're having those deficiencies, those challenges, the medication exists so that you can compensate for it. And then that medication will have certain side effects. As to whether or not you're going to get addicted to it, there's no way you're going to know that you're going to get addicted to something unless you have a history of addiction, unless you've been addicted to things before and you're pretty certain that that's the kind of thing that's going to happen if you take something. But like I know people who have had addictions, for instance, who have been alcoholic, who have also taken medication to treat certain things, and they don't get addicted to the medication. They don't abuse the medication. They use it, and it has a positive effect on them because it does the thing that they need to do. They need it to do. Anything in extreme amounts is going to probably have some level of negativity. Like it's going to have some level of negative effects on you. Everybody's body is a little bit different. Everybody's brain, their context is a little bit different. That said, if you have an issue with something, go try to get medicated. Like, it's not easy, but it's a process that is worth doing because when you get that medication, there's a great chance that you get that medication and it helps you and your life is changed forever and you have a really positive impact. It has a really positive impact on you. It's a great possibility that it happens because it happens a lot. Okay? It happens a lot to people. So don't just rob yourself of the chance. Don't rob yourself of the chance because of your fears. At least give yourself the chance. And then if it doesn't work out, then you can say, well, it didn't work out, and analyze it and say, well, that's because of this, this, and this. But you can't just discount it. So absolutely give it a try. And don't worry about like those fears of being dependent on drugs. Like, you're dependent on food. You know what I mean? Like, you're dependent on consuming protein. You're dependent on drinking water. You're dependent on getting certain vitamins. Okay? Your body's going to depend on certain things. And if you have a deficiency in certain areas, you're going to need a little help. So don't be so worried about being dependent on things. Nobody's fully independent about anything. We don't control most shit. Look for help. Always look for help, whether it's medication or something else. How many takes does it normally take to do an intro, and do you ever get tired of this YouTube thing? Sometimes intros are the things that take the longest because you sit there and it's the first time you say something in the microphone, and you're hearing your voice and you're like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right. So sometimes I'll have like 5-6 different takes of an intro before I'm like, okay, I'll just do that. Do I ever get tired of this YouTube thing? Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I actually get tired of things very quickly. So in the short-term sense, like all the time. In a long-term sense, I don't think so. I don't think in a long-term sense I'm really ever going to be tired of it anytime soon, because it's my job and it's a pretty good job and it compensates me better than any job I've ever had. And I think I have a future in it that is very promising in terms of the compensation I can receive from it and the cool things that can happen because of it. And it allows me to do a lot of fun things, even though like it's not the perfect situation. And I might get a little bit fatigued or a little bit burned out or a little bit, I can struggle with it a lot mentally sometimes. But when I get back to my health and I take breaks, I get back to being happy about it. Adderall helped with my focus because I was constantly underweight because it had such a strong appetite suppression. Yeah, it can have a strong appetite suppression. I don't get very hungry when I'm on Adderall, so that is something to be pretty wary about. Even when I'm crashing from Adderall, I can like still not be very hungry. What I will say about that is, yeah, like that's one of those things that you can maybe try to offset by having some type of nutrient or some type of supplement or some type of medication that can help with that too, and checking if that has an interaction. Or if you just don't think it's worth it, you can just not do Adderall and either try some other type of medication or just not do any medication. For some people, they try medication and it's not great for them and they're like, I'll just do something else. You want to get to that point first where you figure out that it's not working for you before you make that determination, particularly if you're struggling. If you're doing well, keep doing what you're doing. But if you're struggling, try things, try things. Especially if you've tried things that aren't medication and they haven't worked for you. What are you waiting for? That was what I was at. That was the situation I was in. I was like, I'm trying everything, and I really think I need medication, especially because I can't change certain circumstances that are really causing me to have these symptoms. What's your favorite song and show at the moment? My favorite song right now. Ooh, let's take a look. Thank you so much, Julian, by the way, for the positive comments and reinforcement. Let me see. So I have been listening a lot to the kids downstairs are screaming again. That's fun. I've been listening to a lot of. I listen to a lot of stuff in like that I've like always liked, or a lot of older records. Like I listen to the song "Traigo Fuego" by La Banda Gorda like pretty often. The song "Lord Pretty Flaco Jody" by A$AP Rocky is one of my favorite songs ever. I listen to it all the time. "Blow the Whistle" by Too Short. "Made You Look" by Nas. As far as something right now that I'm like I keep listening to over and over again, if I had to pick one, then I would say, I would say the song "Llorarás" by Oscar de Leon, because that's a classic that I just recently like kind of retouched with and was like, oh my god, this song's so good, and it keeps getting stuck in my head, so I'll go with that. And what's his favorite show at the moment? I'm not really watching any shows right now, but I'll let you know. The Wire is my favorite show ever, is what I'll say. Thank you so much, by the way, to Nigel Kelly. I missed your comment earlier. Gorb says, hey Elliot, I was wondering, is being a video essayist give enough money? Sorry if it's too personal. I think I kind of addressed that when I addressed the other comment. But yeah, it can pay well. It can pay really well depending on what you do, and for me it's paying pretty good, for what I'm doing. Oh, Hunter, well, welcome to your first stream. There will be more in the future, so hopefully I catch you some more times. Thoughts on if you fancy a more philosophical question, what's the problem with humanity? Where are we going wrong? I don't think that there's a way to answer that. We're going wrong. Let's say because of we're power structures. Let's go with that. Because power structures and depression. Thoughts on informal hierarchies in leftist circles, just meaning that in spite of intents to do otherwise, hierarchies can still manifest if people are not diligent, fully honest, etc. Also thoughts on leftist infighting, bullying. So as far as the hierarchy stuff, I kind of talked about that earlier when I talked about sort of my thoughts on anarchism. So check that out earlier in the stream, which you probably have if you're watching the stream now. If you missed it, then go back. As far as leftist infighting and bullying, I think there's a degree to which conflict is going to happen inside groups, and people need to be, to just grow up and kind of deal with that. But there's also a degree to which you have to fucking stop being so toxic about it. Like, there's no reason to dox people. There's no reason to there's no reason to even call people out of their names or shit on people, tell people that they're losers. Like, people are just really fucking mean, and people will find any excuse to be mean, whether they're leftists or otherwise. And I don't think it's super productive. Now, sometimes a good dunk is a good dunk. A good insult is a good insult. Sometimes you gotta call people out in a pretty harsh way. I get it. But the problem more exists when people are too focused on their egos and their personal satisfaction and enjoyment of making somebody else suffer or being mean towards somebody else, as well as thinking that their differences are too steep to overcome, which sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're not. Just because a person doesn't get certain things that you get, just because a person doesn't see what your point is or doesn't understand the value of a specific ideological idea that you have, doesn't mean that they're completely useless to work with. There are times where you have to splinter, but otherwise it's just not that important. Like, sometimes you find things with which you can work with a person, and when you can't work with a person on something, then you don't. But you can work with the same person on something else, maybe. Glad you caught up, comrade. Kid Elliot would have killed for 70,000 subs. I know, right? I need to finish watching Dr. Fatima's video on changing systems. Yes, you spelled that correctly, and I actually am gonna check that out soon as well. What's up, Nova? Comrade, people need to be able to have humility, but there needs to be a fostered sense of comfortability, make criticisms and self-criticisms. Yeah, I mean, the whole point is to be critical. So we have to accept that we're going to be critical toward each other. But being critical towards somebody doesn't mean that you can't, like, respect their humanity. Yes, that's the video, Nelson. Do you have any thoughts on Deleuze? I've never read Deleuze. What is your thoughts on Slavoj Žižek? I don't know too much about him. I've not really checked out too much of his work. What books have you been reading lately? I have been reading Pedagogically Oppressed. I've been reading that book by Mike Davis that I talked about earlier, Prisoners of the American Dream. I have been reading this book, which I don't have in front of me but is in another room, Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I've been reading The Big Short a little bit because I got back into like that movie and like the 2008 crisis, like kind of learning about it a little bit again. Opinion on AI, do you use it in some capacity? I mean, technically I use it in the apps that incorporate it in some way, but I don't really have I don't really care for AI. I think it can be useful. It can be good for certain people in certain ways. Of course, like that's how technology works, is that there's going to be some uses of new technology that are going to be really great, and there's going to be some uses that are bad. I probably would have been doing a lot of AI cheating in school back in the day, which is not great, but at the same time, for people who, for instance, have issues writing, having an AI software that can help them write can be useful. Favorite 80s song? Great question. Favorite 80s song? So there's a lot of answers to this as usual, but what I'll go with today is Rakim's record, Don't Sweat the Technique. Rakim and Eric B and Rakim. Great record, great bass line. Rakim is one of the GOATs. definitely check it out, especially if you need like a good workout record. That's a absolute classic. Super random. How many languages do you know? Dos. What are the 3 requirements to be a YouTuber? A camera, a microphone, and editing software. Good luck with life. Thank you, Kayla. That looks so ominous. How do you grow a spine? In the ideological standing for your position sense, of course. Well, I don't think you need to be obtuse, and I don't think you need to just stand for your positions in any sense other than like, you know, when you're actually engaging in real action. I don't think, you know, I think it's good to be open-minded. I think it's good to not always articulate your feelings about everything. I think it's good to sometimes bend your opinions and change because people are multiple and they change. As far as how to grow a spine, though, it's more so about being comfortable with yourself and your present and who you are. This goes back to Buddhism again. Like, if you can cultivate happiness with your present, with your present self and your present situation, and with yourself as a non-self, which is you know, again, non-dualism, then you have a better sense. Like your brain just you ease up and you have a better sense of like what's important and what's not important as far as what you need to fight for and what you don't. How does the insanity of the world not drive you crazy? The realization of global capitalism and its consequences really take the sparkle out of life. Again, see earlier, like Buddhism is a big part of it for me. Personal situations are honestly going to affect you a lot more than external situations. We are always, as humans, conditioned to think about our immediate and our personal more than we think about the external and what's not in front of us. Even if we know that everything's fucked up on the outside, we're not generally going to feel that bad about it if we feel like everything's good in our personal lives. Because if everything's good in our personal lives, our bodies feel good, our brains feel good, we're happy, we smile, we have fun with our friends, we have good social life, we have good family life. And we know that those things are good enough for us to be happy in terms of our day-to-day lives, even while reconciling the anger and the fear and the despondency that can come sometimes from recognizing the things that are doing really badly, the things that are going badly, the things that could be going in a really terrible direction, i.e. our ongoing climate crises. So, yeah, how to not be driven crazy by the world around you. I mean, you have to foster a good world in front of you. That's the first thing. Like good world here, good world here. When it comes to your own personal feelings and sanity of life, like that's a big part of it. And that also has to do with, of course, your social conditions, your economic conditions, the state of the world. But you have way more of control over your personal situation and your short term and the things that are in front of you. And you also get affected a little bit more by them than by the external, by the bigger picture things. And that question I already answered. So that's about it. Yeah. Do you think autonomy is a useful concept for political organizing? Do you think that there is a tension or a complement or something else, better autonomy in constructing effective politics? I mean, I think autonomy is probably a useful concept for political organizing as long as you define it well. In terms of like, what things can you control? And if you can't control something, and it really would be better if you controlled something, then what can you do to work towards getting that control? Which is sort of what we talk about when organizing, in terms of organizing for, you know, socialism and stuff. Zizek seems like controlled opposition. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know anything about him. Like, I don't really know. Problem with humanity is indeed hierarchies and oppression, unjust hierarchies. I think the source, though, is a lack of kindness. I'm so unbelievably tired of people trying to create enemies, if that is the word, right word for that. I don't think that that's really a useful way to look at the problem with the world. I don't think the problem with the world is that people are just so unkind and everybody just needs to learn to be kinder. People are the way that they are because their situations are the way that they are. Individual kindness towards each other could definitely improve a lot of things if we all just decided to be kind. But the fact is that kindness is not something that is so easy to define. It's not some solid thing. Everybody, you can't dictate to another person how they should be kind. Like, there's a lot of people that are very justified in being very mean towards certain people, and there's a lot of people that we think are not justified at all, but to them they feel like just like what we think is justified is justified, that they think that their thing is justified. And then nobody's the king of everything and gets to say like what it is and what it isn't. But we fight for what we fight for, right? We fight for the things that we think are valuable. I think kindness is something like, if we talk about it, you know, maybe in a sense of like a radical kindness of like a being humane or whatever. I don't know. I just don't think it's very interesting. I think kindness is something that like people overemphasize, and especially in terms of political conversations. In day-to-day life, sure, but like I think kindness without wisdom and without skillfulness in the Buddhist sense, and kindness without praxis is essentially useless. It just deteriorates. It becomes nothing. You need to have all of those things, and like kindness that is sectarian. You know, like you need to have all of these things, or else you're just never gonna have the real thing. So yeah. Do you think it's possible to ever know enough to feel confident in anything? 10,000 hours or what exactly? It's confidence separate to that. Confidence is more a feeling. It comes and goes. If you're confident about something absolutely all the time, then it's probably not a good thing. It's I think of confidence more as a feeling that emerges, a feeling that emerges from your brain getting certain chemicals, you know? So it's to say like, yeah, like if you feel confident about something, a lot of times that can come from you feeling good healthily, like health-wise, and good socially, etc. Now, as far as like a long-term sort of idea of confidence of like being like, this is what I believe in type of thing, then see my earlier response about Buddhism as like this idea of understanding non-duality and understanding like the non-self, and being happy in the present, and being happy, you know, like all like Buddhism is like something that provides me that understanding of like what it is that you should even be confident about, and what it is that confidence can even mean. So yeah, you know, I think punching someone for their beliefs is never kind. I disagree. I think sometimes you really need to punch people because they're threatening to punch you, for instance, because they're enacting some type of violence in you in a different way. I don't generally want to punch somebody. I think generally if you can avoid punching people, do it. Sometimes punching a person, at the very least, is like, I'm not gonna be super against it. Like if you punch a Nazi, you know, this is the thing people have been talking about for a few years now, right? Like punching a Nazi. If you punch a Nazi, you know, even if you could have avoided it, like I get it, you know. And it's not necessarily like you're being mean, because, you know. But a lot of cases, people will say like, oh, well, that wasn't merited, but like sometimes it is, because a person is like threatening you or is embodying you. Punching extremists makes them more extreme. Here's the thing about violence. Violence is not a means towards winning an ideological battle. Violence is a means towards accruing safety. It is a means towards escaping a bad situation. It is the same thing as running away from a bad situation. You use violence to say, I would like to live to see another day. And I think this is the thing that everybody's missing. Is like, oh, well, if you punch those people, like, they're not gonna get it. And it's like, okay, but like, if I'm in this situation and I think I'm trying to make somebody get something and I punch them, then yeah, that's dumb. That doesn't make any sense. But if it's in the case of like, there's a Nazi there doing a like one of those rallies that they do, I'm gonna punch one, even if it's not even what I would necessarily do. I'm not gonna judge you for that, because there's a lack of safety, right? And you're in the mindset of like, we need to get to the next day. And if we keep letting people come here and threatening us with violence, then how are we going to get to the next day where we can even talk about the ideology anymore? So, I don't know. I mean, people talk about punching like it's like this thing that just exists in this absolute sphere. It's like something that I have kind of an issue within a lot of popular Buddhism as well. It's like, no, like you could tell in a situation whether somebody either it was right to punch somebody or was justified in punching somebody. We can be smart, you know, we can do that. It's never my first resort, but it's one of the big questions when it's appropriate. Just giving them an excuse for what? I got censored because if I did it too overly, but if I said that too, unless you punch a Yahtzee. Yeah, like if you're punching a Yahtzee, if you're punching a Nazi is what I wanted to say. If you're punching a fascist, if you're punching somebody who's threatening you, that's like potentially going to really harm you and you don't know what else to do. If you're rebelling against the state and they're sending out forces against you, like of course you're gonna, you know, violently engage with them. Then again, we're both New Yorkers, so maybe we're the problem. Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like in New York these things are a bit more understood, maybe, but I don't even know if that's the case. I think there's a lot of people who will say the same things in New York. You know, yeah, pacifism isn't always like it's like, you know what I mean. Like, I think we're talking about something like self-defense, and what constitutes the self-defense. Violence that is not called for is bad. Violence that is called for is good. You know what I mean? Or it's not really violence, like whatever you want to say. But like, the act of punching somebody is like sometimes not bad. They want nothing more than to be punched. But that's you don't understand. It's like somebody comes up to you and has a knife. You punch them to knock them out so that they don't attack you with the knife. Does it matter whether they want to be punched or not? No. What matters is that you defended yourself because you had to. That's the point. That's what we're talking about. You don't punch people because you're like, this is going to work win the long-term battle of ideas. You punch because sometimes in the present there is a threat that you are trying to ameliorate. So who gives a it's like, you know, oh, they want to be punched. You know, like, not to be the guy always pushing theory, but revolutionary violence is a thing. Yeah, I mean, I have Fanon right here who says the decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. They're probably not going to use the knife, but they want to. All right, you're just being you're just being ridiculous now. You're just being ridiculous now, because you know exactly what I'm talking about. Don't be silly. Anyway, have a great night, everybody. This was a good hour and 45 minutes of a stream, which is fascinating. I'm gonna take some magnesium, ease into a beautiful night, and I appreciate everybody for coming down. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the new video, and to see you soon.